But people start saying, well, if that can happen in Panama, it could also happen in Peru. It could also happen in Ecuador. I mean, maybe it's less likely to happen in Chile, but it could happen, right? I mean, could it happen in Argentina? Yes, because there's always been a political, uh, roller coaster there. So, it affects. It not only affects, it affects the region, and that is of concern.
Hey, hey, everybody. We're back with another episode of the Deals podcast. Hi, Lucho.
Hey, Paola, how are you?
I'm very good, very good. We have a kind of a tour today. We're going to be touring the continent with a few bits and pieces of news and sort of activities. And at the end, I'll talk a bit about what we saw at IMARC, which we had planned for you to come, and that would have been a great time. We would have enjoyed a lot more because it was full on. But yeah, sadly you couldn't make it this year, so maybe next year.
Yes, yes. I mean, I think there'll be plenty of opportunities, but it is an exciting time. It's an exciting market. In the last couple of weeks, we've seen a bit of a roller coaster going around in all of or many of the Latin American countries, which makes me start wondering, where the action is going to go next.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So, which country do you want to get started? Should we start with Chile so that we can talk about the Tesla, the Tesla bit?
Yeah, sure. I think if we talk about in general, in Latin America, how safe are investments, how attractive are investments. I mean, Chile hit the headlines with a drama over lithium, earlier this year, and people started calling it a nationalization right away when the new lithium policy came out. But we had a full podcast with a guest that clarified that it wasn't a nationalization, but indeed it is more government participation, right? Uh, but even before that, I mean, Chile was talking about raising taxes to all of the mining concerns, and this is a country that has been one of the darlings in stability for foreign investment, particularly for very large projects, because Chile has some very large projects of mine in operation, and that investment was attracted by that stability that it lost, 2 or 3 years ago with the sort of social political instability that arose, and then with changes of government that were hinting towards higher taxes and higher participation, and stuff like that, and sort of ended in lithium. Why don't you go ahead and talk about the Tesla thing?
Yeah. So, what we heard this week was that back in September, Tesla, so it was announced via the Public Gazette, which is, this publication where all the new registrations and sort of companies have to announce that they've established operations. So we get it a little bit later, but so back in September, Tesla had already completed their procedures and all the steps to establish a local subsidiary. So it's Tesla Chile SPA, I think the name is. So that tells us a few things. It's that Tesla has now a local subsidiary. Obviously, we know that in itself doesn't mean anything particular yet. It does, but it does mean that they have gone through a process, and we knew when there's rumors something's happening, and we had like a few rumors of Tesla. So now they have a subsidiary. They are recruiting. That's the other piece of news. They are recruiting, so actively recruiting for the local team, for building a local team. So they're recruiting a country manager and some other positions. So that to me is telling us that first they are actively saying, okay, we do need to be here. BYD, the Chinese battery maker and a car maker, is there very actively. They're investing about 290 million in a facility, in a lithium facility. So that's saying, that Tesla is kind of seeing that, okay, there's a lot of things happening. And I had my reading. Some people didn't agree about my reading, but my reading was also that because of what's happened with the new lithium policy in Chile, that could be maybe Tesla is seeing the possibility that they could access some of the upcoming opportunities because of SQM and Albemarle needing to renegotiate because of the new policy. So it's a good thing to be there locally, and they can talk and lobby, and I think that's going to be part of the story now. So that's the piece of news.
So, two comments there, right? I mean, what a way to be like so late in the game. I mean, that train has left the station a while ago. You know, you know, I, as you know, I mean, we were involved with the Maracunga project, which was, recently announced that it's being sold to Codelco, right? I mean, when I was, leading that project as the CEO of Li3, I went to see Tesla in California when Tesla was talking all about, we're going to be involved, and we're going to get involved in the mining, and they wanted an offtake contract without putting a dime. Well, how am I supposed to develop a project without your support? Because with your name alone, I'm not going to raise money, right? And I mean, they just weren't there, right? I can tell you that, in the process of evaluating of groups evaluating the Maracunga project, there were a number of companies, and I don't, there was a formal process that was ran, and I was not part of that process. But the things get around, and there were a number of companies, among them all of the Chinese companies that looked and stuff like that. But a number of automakers, looked at it as well. Now, I don't know if Tesla participated in that process or not, but for all intents and purposes, Tesla's late. But okay, I guess better late than never. Better late than never. I mean, the other thing is, I mean, Chile still hasn't resolved the political issue around the Seol, right? I mean, supposedly there's new legislation that still has a long way to go, but there's new legislation that will no longer make lithium a strategic mineral. So you won't need the Seol anymore. I mean, that whole thing will have pretty much disappeared. But I mean, until that happens, you're still subject to this whole Seol process that has, at least in my view, very little clarity. And in which case, I mean, most projects don't really care about because they're too early stage, but they will have to care about at some point. I mean, the only project that has been completely politically or administratively de-risked is Maracunga, because now it's going to be in the hands of Codelco, and Codelco state-owned, and there's no better way of de-risking a project politically, administratively, than making it state-owned. So it's that simple, right? Everything else that's lithium in Chile is going to be facing problems.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that this is late. I think what I'm trying. Well, I'm seeing something positive though in the fact that they are doing this now, which is, it may be sort of like an implied. It may be nothing, but it could be an implied sort of acknowledgement that, well, actually, yeah, we do need to be closer to the resources. Yeah, we need to do that. We need to be where things are happening, and you despite the new regulations, we are going to keep seeing lithium come out of Chile, as we're still going to be seeing lithium come out of Australia, and they are active here. So I think the other bit that is connected to that, and I'll let you go through the other countries after, but There was a news connected to Chile and Rio. So Rio has partnered with Codelco to work on copper. So they're going to be looking for copper deposits in what was the third region, which is Atacama, and that could also connect with this new lithium policy, because if their deal is with Codelco and Rio is interested, has exposure to lithium, and they have said that they want more, could this be in down the road? Include this partnership could also include lithium, in the future, and that could be really meaningful. So if you do that, being local, it makes also more sense. So I'm trying to connect, you want to connect the dots, and you're trying to read between the lines of what's happening. So that was what I was thinking.
Well, the moment when they hire someone that's been in the market, not on the technical side, but on the business side or the project side in the region, not only in Chile, but I mean, I'm hearing of a lithium project here in Peru that not the ones in Puno, but more like around Arequipa. I still have to get more info on it. But I'm hearing about that. I'm looking at a lithium projects early stage in Paraguay. I hear about all of these hard rock lithium projects in Argentina that I had never heard about before, right? I mean, lithium is popping up all over the place. What Tesla needs is some business development people like ourselves, for example. Hello, that are actually,
Hello.
in the region and looking at this, and then with their ear to the ground. I mean, that's the way you're going to develop.
Yeah. No, absolutely. All right, should we move to another country?
Yeah, so let's move across the Andes, talk about Argentina. I mean, if we're just covering the different countries and make a quick blurb about each one, we spent a better part of a podcast and just recently also about Argentina and the elections and the political instability, but really concluded that the projects are there, the resources are there, and that's not going to change, and projects will move ahead. We also talked that it was in Argentina, it was all about the provincial governments as opposed to the central government. The central government obviously has a say, but the provincial governments have put a stop to projects. I mean, there was a big iron ore project that was put aside. I think it was called Rio Negro, if I'm not mistaken. But I mean, that was put aside. Pan American Silver is still sitting on Navidad that cost a pretty penny and is a huge silver
Those are not
deposit
new.
in Chubut. No, they're not new, right? But I mean, they're still there, and the Navidad project isn't going to go anywhere anytime soon. It doesn't seem in Chubut, and but you've got the more friendly jurisdictions. But point is, there is political risk in Argentina, always has been. But I mean, for mining specifically, there are fantastic projects, and depending on where you are, you have to learn how to manage the jurisdictions. And in lithium, for example, the Jujuy, Salta were very direct about how to manage that jurisdictional risk, etc. Basically, making the provincial government a 6 or 8% owner of the project, so it was pretty much a free carried interest through construction and to get paid back from cash flow. And you know what? That at least gave you it cleared. There was a very clear path. Some might consider it expensive. I consider it a cost of doing business, but a very straightforward path. Okay, I mean, I was there when a certain company, was building their project or was looking at their project in one of those provinces that I just mentioned, and we were sitting there with the governor, and the governor in front of us called the head of the environmental administration and said, "We need to fast track this project," and it had nothing to do with corruption or anything like that. It was like, we are now part owners of this project. It is in our interest to fast track this project, and that's what we're going to do as a provincial government, right? So, there's practicalities and practicalities.
Yeah. So I think in Argentina, what is most relevant, you said it, the fact that It's a federal country, means that the provinces are the ones that call the shots, at least until you reach production. After, the things shift and you do have to deal more with the national authorities. But so that means you need to work where in the specific provinces that have support for the industry. That's what I advise, and I've been advising clients for the longest time. So if you're gonna go to a difficult province, you're gonna have, there's wonderful resources. You mentioned Navidad, there's Scale, there's like a bunch of great projects that are located in provinces that do not want to see any mining activity. So if you're gonna do that, you're putting yourself at a very high risk. Of course, those projects are cheap because you don't know if they're gonna get developed. So if someone wants to buy them, maybe that's an opportunity. But for the more sort of straightforward players, there's a list of provinces. Jujuy and Salta are in the list. San Juan is in the list. And Santa Cruz is in the list. And there's not a bunch of, there's a few that are, prospective. You can operate. Don't go to the other ones. Just let them be. And when they realize that the provinces are actually, La Rioja has some, Catamarca has some good progress. It doesn't mean that you won't find any issues. There's always a social license issue that you need to manage locally, and sometimes it can be scale can be you have the provincial scene, but you still have to make sure that the local communities are on your side. So I think that's first. Just go where you need to, where you are welcome. Don't go to the other places. Just let them be. And I'm seeing even today, we're still getting people, and this, we're still talking to people looking for new assets in Argentina or wanting to enter, because despite all the issues, there's still opportunities, still underappreciated, still underexplored. So this outcropping. So we love Australia, but here it's much harder to find. That's why you use geophysics a lot more here, because you have not all, but most of the new opportunities are undercover. But in Argentina, there's still so much stuff that is visual, like you can see it with the naked eye. So it's still gonna be in our view, still a place that you can find opportunities, and you can manage it. You have to manage intelligently and with good local support. But yeah, that's our view. All right, next country.
So
Oh no,
moving
you
on.
want?
Yeah, just a quick mention to two
Yeah.
countries that we hardly ever talk about, but I had a number of conversations over a gold project that in the end didn't go through in Uruguay, and I found Uruguay to be very, very open to investment, mining business. Very little mining going on in Uruguay, but if there's prospectivity there, very friendly government. I mean, governments, communities, the provincial governments, very open for business. And I hear the same about Paraguay. Again, not much mining going on there, but good prospectivity. I think there are countries that you need to take a look at. I mean, because you don't, there's not much mining experience, doesn't mean that the resources aren't there, and certainly doesn't mean that they should be, people shouldn't be open for business. And I mean, we'll sort of talk a little bit about that in our conclusion. I talk about, one of my favorite countries, Bolivia. That's because I'm Bolivian, right? And I love some of the prospectivity that I've been hearing lately, particularly on the copper side. I hear about copper on the border with Chile and Peru and that area, which makes a lot of sense just geologically. And I hear about nickel potential on the border with Brazil, which also makes sense because geologically, and a lot of gold in the middle and all over the place, and of course silver. Still a lot of potential, but people are understandably very concerned about the country. Bolivia has also had their things around nationalization. Now, it doesn't mean that the government just generally says, hey, I'm going to nationalize you, but it takes away the concessions for one reason or the other. It happened with South American silver and their indium silver project, Malcota, I think it's called, or something like that, some time ago, and that was because of social unrest in the communities, and the country took away the concession,
Yeah.
and it went to arbitration, and Bolivia lost, and I think Bolivia either lost or is probably about to lose an arbitration with Glencore over nationalizing those assets, and those assets were directly nationalized. Some of the Glencore assets there, so understandable, but I hear things are getting a little bit better, and again, there is a good chance of doing something if you in Bolivia's case, I think with a local partner. We've talked to a couple
Mm-hmm.
of excellent potential local partners, but I mean,
Yeah.
it's one to look at. If we move on to Peru, Peru hasn't really had nationalization, but not too long ago, I guess about 8-10 years ago, which is not long at all, there was the Santana project that was Bear Creek Mining, and Alan Garcia pulled the permit and took over the concession because of social unrest in the project. Rather than resolving the issue or remediating, they basically pulled the plug on the project to avoid a greater social issue, right? I don't know if it's for the greater good or whatever that was, but it ended up costing the government, tens of millions of dollars. I don't know, I can't remember how many exactly, but it cost them money in an arbitration against Peru, the company made against the Peruvian government. So, Peru has been of late in the news because of social unrest and community unrest that has affected projects. The political aspect is still there. By now, I think everyone's going to be like, shit, this guy's trying to like scare us away from Latin America. No, I'm just trying to sort of say every country is going to have their risks. And, no matter where you go, in Latin America or elsewhere, I still think that the money's going to follow ultimately. It's going to follow the deposits and the quality of the deposits. And those are going to be many times in risky countries. But, mining will prevail because it's an important source of revenue and it's an important source of development. And every government realizes that. Whether they know how to act around that is a bit of a different story, but every country realizes that, right? So, Ecuador, we've talked about Ecuador, and of course, first there was a bit of social unrest, and then the Constitutional Court put pretty much a stop to all of the projects, not only mining but industrial projects, etc. Even infrastructure projects, roads, hospitals. Put a stop on roughly 160 projects, and we should have news on that imminently. I mean, I thought we were going to have news by this time, but there was a strong rumor, news to be coming out from the Constitutional Court. They were going to be making a decision in the next couple of days. So I think it's going to be imminent that either they uphold this moratorium on the permitting, on advancing them on permitting, or they actually allow the permits to the process to continue, which actually puts a few mining projects back in the scale, right? I mean, some of the projects that are advancing quickly at Adventus Mining, Tico, I'm a director, and La Plata, but Adventus was supposedly, allegedly, in a undertaking a sales process or a strategic review just earlier this year, in the second quarter of this year, and that wasn't publicly, it wasn't put out there, but it was happening. We know that, and this has affected it, and this noise created by the political side in terms of elections, the social disruption, and now this Constitutional Court coming out of the blue, is scaring people. And you've got some big projects advancing there, right? You've got Dundee with Lomas Largas, I think it is. You've got Sol Gold. there's some big projects going on there that need strong, are big projects. They need financing. They need strong support. Some cases held by junior companies that don't have that backing are looking for solutions there. Um, you know, and of course now you move to the one that has been around, has been in everyone's radar for
London.
the last few months, but particularly in the last week, which is Panama with
Oh,
Cobre
yeah.
Panama and First Quantum, right? I mean, you know, they were doing okay. They had a problem. They reached a deal with the government, and now, boom! I mean, there's going to be a referendum.
But it took, honestly, I think I mean, I was surprised that because they had a lot of issues to get to an approval. So that was a long road. And then they got it. And I was surprised that they got it because I thought, oh, this is gonna get tricky. And now that they needed the extension, the whole social situation erupts again. And it looks really bad now. It's
well, I mean, right now, as the way I see it, if I look at it very pragmatically, right? I mean, First Quantum had, uh, and First Quantum and the Panamanian government had a number of issues that needed to be resolved. That put a hold on the project for a period of several months, right? That but finally were resolved. There were contracts signed by the
yeah,
Panamanian government earlier this year, and you're
yeah,
like, okay, we're putting that issue behind,
yeah,
okay? And out of the blue comes out we're whatever. The way I interpret it, frankly, is like what we signed no longer valid. We're rethinking things, and the I don't know how many billion that you've invested are now at risk because I'm thinking you know there's the risk that I'm changing my mind.
yeah.
I mean,
That's basically it.
so I mean, all of our Latin, all of these Latin American countries that I've mentioned up to now, we pride ourselves on, oh, I have a long-term tax stability treaty, right? In terms of taxes and contracts and bilateral agreements and stuff like that. I mean, that goes out the window when you're talking about a what $10 billion project.
Mm.
This thing is obviously a bad precedent for Panama. But I mean, Cobre Panama is Panama's mining industry, right? But people start saying, well, if that can happen in Panama, it could also happen in Peru. It could also happen in Ecuador. I mean, maybe it's less likely to happen in Chile, but it could happen, right? I mean, could it happen in Argentina? Yes, because there's always been uh, a political roller coaster there. So, it not only affects Panama, it affects the region, and that is of concern, right? And I don't know, for example, if we compare it to Africa, like what happens in the DRC, I don't think spreads out to the rest of Africa just in terms of tainting the region, right? Um, Unfortunately, I think in terms of Latin America, investors tend to look at Latin America. Yes, there will be countries that will be, I was talking to a fund on Friday, and he was very clear. Argentina is a no-fly zone. That's the way they put it. Argentina is a no-fly zone for our fund. Okay, right? But I mean, there's others that are going to
Little
start saying, you know what? I mean, Latin America is a no-fly zone for a little while until things just calm down and until we
well,
start
you
seeing
still
a trend that is investor friendly as opposed to you know to a degree shying away from investors.
you have to take the actual hard data and um, the fact that Latin America still attracts most of the exploration dollars. That's pretty significant. So investors are still supporting that, and we may see a lot of changes in what's happening, down the line. But I think in that sense, these are countries with better structures and better infrastructure as well. It's still going to be, a reason why people put money to invest there and drill and do all these things that we need to do to find deposits. So I mean, you still need mineral in different countries and different continents. So it's all good. There's space for everyone. But yeah, I think we still need to have. There's always going to be, similar to what we were saying about the sort of these provinces, these are provinces in Argentina that you should not go, so leave them out and go to the other ones. The same thing applies for countries, in my view. There are countries, there's 6 countries for me. There's 6 countries that you go, and the other ones are all like, oh, maybe let's consider, or maybe just no. Like for investment, I have 6. My list is 6, and and I haven't been able to add another one to the list in over a decade. But anyway,
I mean, is Peru one of those countries on your list?
Yeah, obviously.
Okay, so I mean, let's go back to Peru for a second, right? I mean, what happens with First Quantum and their investment in La Granja? I mean, they're supposed to invest $370 million into La Granja now. I mean, La Granja has taken a lot of time because of social unrest.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, and now these guys are basically earning into a project that is huge, but how do their investors feel about them spending $375 million when they've got this hot potato on one of the largest projects in the world, and an attractive project like Cobre, Panama, with a huge investment already, right? Of doing, obviously in an order of magnitude, not that big of an investment, but that $375 million is the precursor to a multi-billion-dollar investment in La Granja if it happens. Now that could be 3 or 4 years down the line, but it's still a multi-billion-dollar investment, right? I mean, Newmont is just merging with Newcrest, and they've got the Yanacocha sulfurs up north in Peru, which rumors say that the capex is about $3.5 billion.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't really know if I would start, spending those, $3.5 billion in Peru right now, considering that you have no clear picture of what's going on in the next election in 2026.
Yeah.
We haven't even gone to 2024, right? I mean, that's 2 years away, and you could say that it flies by, but $3.5 billion is $3.5 billion. So there's, I don't know. Maybe I woke up on the wrong side of the bed today, because now that I hear myself talk, I really sound myself really negative, and I'm not. I mean, the deposits are here, and I think there's some great opportunities, and I think opportunities abound. Okay, but I don't think there's as many exploration dollars as there were before, and that's just a market thing. Okay, I think a lot of the exploration dollars. I mean, I guess you'd have to take a look at exploration dollars that are going into juniors that are investing in Latin America versus exploration dollars that are in budgets of majors that are going to Latin America, right? Because the BHPs, the Rio Tintos, the Anglos, the Barricks, the Newmont, they all have some big exploration budgets for Latin America, and they'll continue to have that. And and big in the exploration market is $20-30 million, but you grab those 5 or 6 companies, and $20-30 million each, amounts to a nice few $100 million, right? Of exploration. But the reality is that junior mining companies are having a very tough time raising money in general for the market, and I think they're going to have a tough time for Latin America if things don't start getting resolved, right? And the biggest concern for Latin American economies needs to be not the 20 or $100 million that get invested in exploration in your country, because of course that's important, but that's long term. But that multi-billion-dollar project in Peru called La Granja, Michiquillay, Yanacocha sulfur, and stuff like that. I mean, there's so many of those that are out there in the case of Peru. I'd just like to have clarity on one or two of those that you can actually, you know, confidently announce, these things are moving ahead, and the government is backing it, and the communities are backing it, and the company is fully committed, because that's what you need to see, right? And I mean, if we move beyond Panama, Mexico's another. Well, AMLO is, that guy. What an emotional roller coaster it must be to work for that guy or with that guy. But
Yeah.
he's already creating problems. I've talked to a number of mining companies that will not look at projects in Mexico unless they're in operation and or fully permitted, because the risk of delays for any kind of permitting in Mexico is very high. Not
Well,
only delays, but actually getting it at all, right?
he's killed the lithium industry. He's killed it before it even got started. So that's
Exactly.
terrible. It's terrible.
I was talking to a fund that financed that project, put together the financing for that project, and they got taken out when Ganfeng acquired it, uh, from the junior company. I think it was Bacanora Lithium.
Yeah,
It's the Bacanora project, right? And I'm like, you dodged the bullet, man, because as you said, I mean,
they got
AMLO
an
killed
exit.
he killed the lithium industry before he even had one. I mean, he's created a national lithium company. I mean, for what? That was the only lithium project. I mean, maybe there's a couple of things in Baja, but I mean, otherwise, there's nothing. And he's like on lithium strategic, and we're going to dedicate a team to do what, my friend? You just nationalized the project that was ready to go. I mean,
So stupid. Yeah, very stupid.
on technicalities, or at least that's what it seems. And Chinese are long-term players, but they're not stupid either, right? I mean, they're going to
Yeah.
move on.
Yeah, and the news piece that we were looking at for the podcast was that they're actually saying they're sort of canceling some of the concessions, saying that they haven't met the government, saying that Ganfeng hasn't fulfilled the investment commitments. So, and it was like, well, we've achieved the commitments. What are you talking about? So that's gonna be a long fight, I presume. I'm sure they're doing something that's, I think, like if you're if you're in silver, if you're in copper, I don't worry about Mexico in that sense. In lithium, I wouldn't touch it, and until it's effectively it doesn't. You can't do anything at the moment, so it's all blocked. I wanted to quickly mention the U.S. because even though and we've seen a change in the type of companies operating and the activity over the last 5 years that is quite significant. And today we see a lot more local projects, so either Canadian, Australian companies having local assets, which was not something that we were kind of used to seeing. But going back to your comment about the risk, and especially for these long-term and big scale projects, such as these things that have been stalled for ages, Resolution, Pebble Creek, and now this Antofagasta Twin Peaks, I think is the name, Antofagasta project. They're all in limbo. It's very unlikely that they're going to move forward. And these are big projects. No, we're not talking, a couple of billion. No, these are huge things. And you have the risk, for long-term long-term delays, and so even if you're investing in the US, you still have that big risk. So if this is a a large ticket investment, are you going to put money in something similar to that if you're trying to invest in the US, or are you trying to get on the smaller side? I even saw this company. I can't remember the name now, but I'll include it in the notes. It's an Australian company that decided to have underground. So even though the geology of the deposit is more suited or suited for an underground and an open pit operation, they've decided to go underground because it's going to make the permitting go easier. It's going to get approved, and that's what they are planning to do. So that's the way they're managing sort of but this is a smaller operation. So what's going to happen if you're an investor and you're trying to get okay, so let's go to a safer jurisdiction. Is it going to be safe? How long is it going to take? Is it going to take 10 years? So, like we were talking, there's risk everywhere. So
Yeah,
you just
but there's something to be said with what's going on in the U.S. and Canada. Uh, in the last 12 to 18 months, right? I mean, I can remember very clearly how 4 or 5 years ago, right, companies were looking at projects in Latin America because the deposits are here, but also because you didn't have the permitting delays and risks that you had in Nevada and Arizona. Remember it clearly, and some of the environmental issues around projects in certain areas in Canada, right? By now, you've got between U.S. and Canada saying, critical metals, blah blah blah. Uh, the IRA that the U.S. has put out. I mean, wanting to promote investments, etc. Things had gotten easier in that sense in North America, and that's reattracting funds into those projects, right? And I know several companies that have have a portfolio of projects in Latin America and are looking at the U.S. or
yeah.
Canada in order to diversify and de-risk their portfolio by having projects there. So there's definitely something to be said to be said in that. But one of the clearest examples of that actually happening, and structural wise, is Lithium Americas and how they split off into basically Lithium Americas North America and Latin America, or Lithium Americas Argentina, and the Lithium Americas, which has Thacker Pass, and directly linked to a very big check from General Motors to basically build that project in North America and not have the Chinese and the Argentina risks and stuff like that. You know, uh, for bigger projects, for bigger companies, you can see that as a trend towards diversification and financial
Yeah.
re-engineering to be able to access the capital, get it into
The
projects.
IRA.
Yeah, that's real money, and it's money that is government protected, and yeah, you want to access that capital that attracts more capital, but many times you're going to need to ring fence that, right? And that's what bankers and advisors are there for.
No, absolutely. All right, so I think we only have missing Colombia. You wanted to have some comments on Colombia, and then we'll close with the IMAC.
Always loved Colombia. I tell you, I visited during my times as a banker. I visited Colombia a number of times, and I love the prospectivity. There was a time when juniors flocked into Colombia, and we're looking at a market that was very fragmented and stuff like that. The reality is, Colombia's in the doldrums right now. I mean, you've got issues around permitting, environmental issues, and the government has been simply very unclear about what it wants to do. It wants investment. I would almost say it desperately wants investment, but you can't have it both ways, right? You can't put so many rules that are difficult to interpret on top of it, and pretend that people are just going to try to work through it, right? I mean, there is lower hanging fruit out there, or what people perceive to be lower hanging fruit, and they're going to gravitate towards those. So I'm disappointed with Colombia and its inability to attract more investment in a country that clearly has a lot to offer, and that business wise, once you're doing business there, uh, as an environment is a very good environment. Good infrastructure, good logistics and stuff like that. It's a pity. It's a pity. We haven't talked about Brazil, but I mean, Brazil has
Oh,
actually
Brazil. Yeah.
come back quite a bit with projects and mid-sized companies. I mean, before you only heard about, Vale and the likes, but now you're hearing a lot of mid-sized. We talked about Sigma Lithium. You've got, Aero Copper that has done wonders with Caraíba, and now expanding Caraíba and striking a deal with CVRD with Vale, to go into another project. Yamana did quite a bit with projects there. I mean, there's a lot going on in Brazil, even though it hasn't had the best reputation over the last few years. So I mean, I think, to conclude, geez, I mean, we've gone through I think through most of the countries. There's Central America, and that has its own problems. We talked about Panama, but you've got some other, very big projects there. Guatemala has Escobal, that Pan American has, which is, also a big silver deposit, and there's other smaller stuff around. Latin America is still incredibly prospective. I think there's a lot to do down here. I think people are going to be a bit more, I don't know if conservative is the word, but I mean, certainly, uh, get a bit picky. But I think there's some good opportunities to be had. Um, you need to get very well acquainted with the local knowledge and what makes, uh, you know what the nuances are, not only in the country but in the province and in the project itself, and that you get from, just ears on the ground and a bit of patience and and willingness to have an open mind.
Yeah. So, all right. Yeah, I agree on the Brazil thing. I think it's changed it's sort of repositioned the country. A lot of the newcomers have repositioned the country, and that's kind of a good segue to go into the closing comments on IMARC, because the CEO of Sigma was here and was being very I didn't go to that presentation, but she was being, very actively recognized and, and feature. And I think it's a great success story, and it's kind of a local story because they started the project and they're local, they're Brazilian. So Ana Cabral, I think it's her name. All right, so the quick comments on IMARC. It was super optimistic. I was expecting everyone to be super sad and crying because we can't, things are difficult in the market, but people were kind of very upbeat. I think this event IMARC is becoming the smaller version of PDAC. There were about 9,000 people coming, which is, from memory, I think is less than half PDAC, but still, like, it's getting close to 40%. So it's significant. And I think the good thing is that it feels that the deals are happening. So you do have retail investors, which are needed, but you also have the industry players that are having conversations, and you run into people like you do in PDAC. You run into people that maybe you didn't plan to meet, but you run into them, and you may come, across a deal that is just in the air. So that was pretty interesting. The graphite rare earth sort of pivot or addition is full on, and it's you had a lot of companies doing that, which is it's something we always see. Graphite got restricted by China a couple of weeks ago, and this was a very quick reaction. And then, the rare earth situation has changed as well, so we're gonna see a lot more of that incoming. Conversations about the energy transition across the sector, not only in people talking about projects and deals, but people that are more across other sectors or the fields within the industry. What else? A few private players or more private players than we normally see. I had a conversation with a few of them, and they're not rushing to list or raise because of what's happening now, but they're working along and investing hard dollars in exploration, even though they're private. And there's some great opportunities with service suppliers and tech combined with exploration, which is something that we've been trying to do for a while. So we're going to have some conversations on that coming up. So let's see where that leads. And this, I got a comment from several people that they were seeing that the Australian better understanding of what it meant investing in energy transition plays in general. So we're seeing a lot more, or they were saying that the Canadian players are going to need to market in Australia a lot more. And I think that may be connected with what's happening with IMARC. So more Canadians were coming. There were a bunch. So it wasn't just Australian. It was full on across. So yeah, so it's gonna be interesting. Again, a shame that you couldn't come, but we have a bunch of things that we're gonna follow up on, and hopefully we'll be telling some more comments on that in the near future.
No, sounds like it was a great event, and certainly from our conversations over the last couple of days, the recap that you gave me, sounds that there's a few things to follow up on, but also a lot of interest just in terms of opportunities that are cross-border opportunities and capital available. The whole rare earth thing, is I think you're just scratching the surface in Latin America on the whole rare earth thing, right?
Yeah.
And you've seen it with the battery metals, but I mean, of course, now copper is a battery metal, but lithium, vanadium, cobalt, nickel, but the rare earth, there's a few companies they're looking at things here, and in general, they're not fully understood. Okay, so and I think there's going to be some good opportunities on that, and we need to explore them. I mean, we need to get a bit more into them. And I'm talking to a couple of groups that tell me that they have interesting projects, but the expertise isn't there, to really be able to evaluate them properly, and it takes a bit of time. A lot of people, are looking for the low hanging fruit, and that's not, they don't want to invest time. But that's where the nice medium term high return opportunities potentially come out from.
Absolutely. All right. I think we're gonna leave it there. We've spoken, and I'm not gonna. This is gonna go like it is. So if you're still here, thank you for listening. It's been a pleasure. And Lucho, take us away.
All right. Well, thank you very much for listening to this whole podcast. I hope it was instructive, a little bit interesting. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, please let us know. Give us a couple of topics. We want to bring some guests in, and it would be interesting to touch a couple of topics that you guys are interested in, and that way we can find the guests. So hopefully we can get some feedback from you to get that. It was very good to see you, Paola. I'm glad things are going well, and we will talk again in a couple of weeks.
Exactly. All right. Bye, everybody.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Lucho and I will be back in 2 weeks. Until then, here's another related episode you may like to watch next. Bye.